Hornet Nation. I'm Allison Garrett, and I am honored to serve as the Emporia State University President. Welcome to the Alumni in the Spotlight interview series, in which we're celebrating this year's distinguished alumni and outstanding recent graduates. We are so proud to recognize Jessica Stallings as one of our 2020 outstanding recent graduates. Each of our undergraduate colleges honors one of their graduates from the last 10 years. Alumni who are honored in this way must have demonstrated excellence in their career and dedication to their profession within the first 10 years after earning an Emporia State degree. Congratulations, Jessica. We are so proud of you. Thank you for your work and for representing Emporia State University so well. And to our audience, enjoy this interview with one of Emporia State's finest graduates.
Thank you, President Garrett. Again, welcome to the Alumni in the Spotlight series. My name is Joanne Brewer. I serve as the Dean of the Teachers College at Emporia State University. Today, we are here to celebrate our 2020 Outstanding Recent Graduate, Jessica Stallings. Jessica earned her Master's of Science in Art Therapy from ESU in 2005 and her Master's of Science in Mental Health in 2011. In May 2019, she received her doctorate in art therapy from Marymount University. Jessica is a registered board-certified art therapist and is a leading expert in the use of art therapy with individuals with autism spectrum disorders. She holds professional credentials in Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. Dr. Stallings' passion for expanding access to high-quality art therapy education and services is demonstrated through her ongoing work to develop program curriculum in other states, as well as active participation in the creation of legislative bills for licensure and insurance reimbursement for art therapists in Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. Jessica has numerous years of experience as an art therapy counselor and mental health clinician. She served as a full-time faculty member in the Department of Counselor Education at Emporia State for 10 years. And continues to serve as an adjunct instructor and grant consultant for the department. Dr. Stallings served as a lead researcher on a number of projects and has several peer-reviewed professional publications. She has presented at the international, national, regional, and state and local levels and is well respected in her field. Working across disciplines, Dr. Stallings assisted Emporia State University in securing grant funding for a rehabilitation services administration innovative training program titled Advanced Skills Development, Enhancing Vocational Rehabilitation Professional Services to Consumers on the Spectrum. Dr. Stallings has served as the president of the Kansas Art Therapy Association and most currently serves as the organization's web coordinator. She has been honored with the Raleigh Silver Research Award from the American Art Therapy Association and as an ESU Advisor of the Year. The Teachers College cannot wait to see what lies ahead in the future for Dr. Jessica Stallings. Lastly, the platform for today will not only be our honored guest, but with our special interviewer, Dr. Galen Wolf-Bordenero, Professor of Counselor Education and ESU's 2020 Row Our Cross Distinguished Professor. They will provide a formal but casual conversation about our honored alumni. After several minutes of discussions, we will then break out into chat rooms for reflective conversations of the interview and return back to the forum and share those conversations. After that, we will go into Q&A. If you have not submitted those questions, please go to the landing page of emporia.edu live to submit your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce you to Dr. Jessica Stallings and Dr. Galen Wolf-Bordenero for a session I am sure you are to enjoy.
Thank you, Dean Brewer. I'm Galen Wolf-Bordenero, and I'm honored to be joined today by one of this year's Outstanding Recent Graduate Award recipients, my colleague and dear friend, Dr. Jessica Stallings.
Thank you, Galen. I'm glad to be here.
Jesse, you've told me that you were a first-generation college student in your family, and now you've earned your BA, your MS in art therapy, MS in mental health counseling, and a doctorate of art therapy. That's an amazing journey. Did you see that as your path when you first started college?
I really didn't, but I've also always been kind of an overachiever. So from the time I learned about art therapy, and I was fortunate to learn about art therapy in high school, which many people don't, I researched art therapy programs and knew that I wanted to pursue a bachelor's degree and a master's degree based on kind of becoming familiar with that. And so I tailored my undergrad to really fit what I needed for prerequisites for that, but didn't necessarily really envision, seeking additional degrees until a bit later.
And I think that when we talk about art therapy and the mental health field, those really combine a number of different academic areas, and your studies have highlighted the intersection of a number of your passions. Can you talk about some of those passions and areas of interest?
Sure. Like I said previously, I was really able to tailor my undergrad degree to pursue a degree in art therapy, which meant, sorry, that was my cat and the pedal of my sewing machine, to be able to really delve into art and psychology, which are something that I've been interested in for a very long time. And I was fortunate enough to have scholarships in undergrad, which allowed me to take some additional classes in art history, which I've also been pretty obsessed with from, as long as I can remember. I had the opportunity to begin working with individuals with autism in undergraduate, first in a private home and then in a group home. And I had seen kind of along the way information about visual communication being very important with, individuals who have autism, and learned as I was working with them that, popular culture is also something that they're often very interested in, which is, I grew up in a family that loved trivia games and Trivial Pursuit and those kind of things. So very much something that was always kind of a part of me. And so in studying art therapy and mental health, working a lot with folks with autism, I've really been able to kind of integrate all those things together, and really been able to make my passions a part of what I do.
And what role did art play in your life when you were in high school and as an undergraduate student?
I grew up in a really small town of less than 200 and went to high school in a neighboring, also very small town. And I took Art 1 and Art 2 in high school, which were all my high school technically offered, the K-12 school that I went to. But that was where I kind of excelled and felt really comfortable. And I was allowed to essentially take Art 2 3 times. And on a transcript, it was Art 3 and Art 4. But I was pretty much able to kind of have independent study space and really explore and be able to try a lot of different media and things like that. And so it was kind of a safe place for me, and a place where I felt kind of adventurous because I was pretty shy, and it was a place where I could really kind of develop some interests that I had. And in college, my art classes really became more specifically therapeutic for myself. I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety as a freshman, and I really used a lot of my art to kind of explore my own mental health and also like as the anxiety soother. And then, as I started working with kids and things in undergrad as a way to connect with other people.
Terrific. And unlike me, I learned about art therapy after I finished my bachelor's degree. You learned about it from a very astute art teacher. And you've told me that you wrote to every art therapy program in the nation, and you received information from every single one of them. And you chose ESU. Can you tell me about that decision?
So yes, I had a tub of information from all the schools in the US and Canada, I believe. And that was really brought to you by the fact that I finished high school around the time the internet was really becoming a thing. So I chose ESU because of the location and affordability and access to faculty. Like I said, I grew up in a town of less than 200 people, and a lot of art therapy programs are in larger areas. And so, it was comfortable going to a city the size of Emporia. But also, Emporia happens to be, one of the only art therapy programs. There's only 3, I think, still at state universities in the US. And so in terms of affordability, that was something that I, as, coming from kind of a lower middle class family who hadn't had people attend college and stuff, could really access the education there. And it was very affordable. And I had opportunities I was a graduate teaching assistant, which helped pay for things. But in addition to kind of that, small atmosphere and affordability, the faculty were always really accessible and the classes were small. And so I didn't feel lost in a crowd. And that was really important.
And you left ESU and began your career back home in Nebraska, and came back to ESU for a second master's degree, but it was really under unique circumstances. You want to share that with our viewers?
Sure. I ended up going back to ESU to teach in the art therapy program, and I taught there for 10 years. And 10 years plus, just 10 years full time, and then as adjunct after that. And when I did that, I had committed to do what I needed to qualify for a mental health license. And art therapy licensing is very kind of uneven across the US. It's getting more prominent and more available all the time. But in Kansas, that meant committing to another master's degree, which was something that I had considered because I love school. So it was in many ways an excuse for me to continue pursuing education. But in order to get my LPC in Kansas, I needed to do, it was additional 50 credit hours of graduate work. And so I did that in the mental health counseling program, which has a lot in common with the art therapy program. They're very allied fields. And it, provided me an opportunity to, explore some of the relationships there. And that license helped facilitate the dual curriculum program at Emporia State, where people can get 2 masters in 3 years, one in mental health counseling and one in art therapy, which relates to, issues of licensure. And art therapy still isn't licensed in Kansas, but art therapy and counseling are, again, very allied. And so it makes sense to be able to use those things together.
Right. And because we were faculty here at the university, we really put a strong focus on high impact learning experience. So you have kind of a unique perspective as both a student and a faculty member. But can you tell me some of the high impact learning experiences that were integral to the programs at ESU and how they were meaningful in your development as a professor?
Yeah, as an art therapy student, internships were a really valuable thing. And, internships are a requirement on that level, but ESU, has Libby Schmunke, who served as the internship coordinator for a long time now. I had the opportunity to be her student and then her colleague. And she really worked very hard to help match us to places that were really good fits for us and what our interests were, and also to help us get experiences and additional things. And so I served as an intern with a school counselor in a small town. And I ended up doing an internship there really because of one particular student they had who had selective mutism. And so this child only spoke to one of their parents. And I did end up seeing additional children there, but that was the kid that I first ended up there to intern with. And I had the opportunity to start, practicing the things that we'd been learning in classes. And one day I asked her to draw a bridge, and she was in early elementary school, so relatively young. We only communicated through drawing, and she wrote me notes, but her spelling wasn't great because she was young. And so I asked her to draw a bridge, which is not uncommon directive in art therapy. And she drew herself on one side of the bridge and her mother on the other. And previous to that day, every other drawing she had ever done, and I'd been working with her for a while at that point, she and mom had been right next to each other. So I knew immediately there was an issue. And she, I went to the school counselor afterward, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I think she's mad at her mom. She drew herself away from her. She scribbled out mom when she colored. And the school counselor let me know that, mom had taken her to an appointment with a specialist, and some things had been said in that appointment that had scared the kid. And so, this child was able to communicate with me visually something that was going on that she didn't really have anybody to talk to about. And so that gave me an opportunity to really see like what I was studying in action, which is, not always something you get in degree programs, even in programs with internships, because if you're not like in a placement or things that's a good fit, you're not necessarily going to see those things. I was also able to attend a lot of conferences as a student, both on the state level and national level. While I was in both degree programs, I attended the American Art Therapy Association conference twice as an art therapy student. I attended the ACA conference, the American Counseling Association conference once as a counseling student, participated actively in the Kansas Art Therapy Association and the Kansas Counseling Association. And a lot of that was because ESU was very supportive of that and really tried to cultivate us being a part of those professional organizations to help develop professional identity, but also for networking, for being able to, know places to pursue work afterward, to find mentors and those kind of pieces. And I was able to present at many of those conferences, and that was really helpful in addition to being a graduate teaching assistant was really helpful in me gaining confidence as a professional. And my first real professional presentation after my art therapy master's was in front of Temple Grandin, who many may be familiar with, who is an adult with autism and also an expert in animal science. And I presented after her in front of 400 people, and I would not have been able to tolerate doing that with the horrible fear of public speaking that I used to have without having some of the experiences I had as a student. And then I ended up being the Kansas Art Therapy Association president not long after I finished my second degree. And my experiences as a student at ESU allowed me the opportunity to really start to understand a lot of the facets of how the different professions are similar and different, like with art therapy and counseling and school counseling and psychology. And that was something that was very useful as a state association president in terms of, interacting with the other fields, advocating for art therapy licensing and such.
And while you were doing your first master's degree, you did a master's project that sought to elevate the profile of the arts as a valuable skill and interest in your hometown. Can you tell us about your master's project?
Yes, I completed a mural with about half a dozen middle school and high school students who were interested in the arts. And I decided to do that because as a high school student, I felt like the arts were not very appreciated just based on some interactions with administration and such. And I mean, I think we see that on the whole in American education, that there's just not as much attention put there. And so I decided I wanted to do a project that would really raise the profile of the arts within the community where I went to high school, but also provide those students an opportunity to be recognized in ways that the athletes and others got recognized that they did not. So we did a historical mural. It happened to be serendipitous at the time that the town wanted a historical mural. And so we did research on the history of the town. They helped me come up with design ideas to work with the town. And we also talked about their own past, present, and future and kind of where they wanted to go in conjunction with that historical mural. And, as a part of that, I did a lit review on, what's the role of arts in education. And, there's lots of evidence that being involved in arts just helps people, perform better all across education. And we ended up being recognized by the two largest newspapers in the state and had, big articles in them. So it was good to be able to provide some of what I, had kind of hoped for as a high school student to people that were in a similar position as me.
I've noticed as we're talking that both of us have a painting by Robert Alt.
We do.
I think that other times when we've talked, maybe your computer wasn't facing that well, but
I moved it so it's up higher. Yep.
yeah.
So we're bringing the spirit of the founder of the ASU art therapy program to this interview.
Yes, which is perfect. We've worked together on art therapy licensure efforts in Kansas, along with students and alumni. And you mentioned some of the parallels between art therapy and counseling and the distinction. Can you share that, your perspectives on that with our participants today?
So art therapy and mental health and school counseling do have a lot in common, and rehab counseling. Much of our work is really founded in the same major psychological and counseling theories that have been developed over the last, 130 years-ish. But counseling often puts primary focus on verbal communication and its used to facilitate healing. And art will be involved in counseling frequently, but that's usually just more of a kind of, a distractor, because people are able often to talk about things better if they're a little bit distracted. Or, it's some sort of soother, like a mandala to color or something like that. Whereas art therapy puts a lot more emphasis on visual communication and use of those visuals as both an alternative to verbal communication and also a kind of adjunctive thing to verbal communication. So not that there's not talking in art therapy, but art therapists are, can sit there for an hour with a client in silence, which is, in counseling, they tell you, you got to get used to silence, but maybe not an hour's worth. And so that makes the art part more accessible to populations that might struggle more with words. And there's also, a distinction that happens there in terms of how the brain functions. So language and visual art are centered in different parts of the brain. And so it gives us access to different pieces. And so counseling may be more appropriate with some conditions, and art therapy may be more appropriate with some conditions, depending on what exactly is going on with that person. So for instance, trauma and dementia, art can be a really good assistive or primary counseling piece in those cases because of how that functions within the brain. And so, like, for instance, at the Intrepid Center at Walter Reed in Washington, D.C., working with veterans, they have a very comprehensive program that has not only verbal counseling, but art therapy and other physically based modalities, because that's able to do a whole brain approach. And so it allows for integration of those things and working together.
And you and I both come from an art background. I know that I then had to take prerequisite courses in psychology before starting my master's degree. Does someone have to identify as an artist or have to have lots of talent either to become or to participate in art therapy?
It's really kind of a misnomer that a lot of people have about art therapy. An interest in art, some experience, at least on the professional side, with using art media are important, but specific identification as an artist and, traditional sort of museum quality talent or fine art talent are not at all necessary. I, in fact, funny enough, as a undergrad, was told at my undergrad that I would never even make it as an art therapist because I wouldn't settle on one artistic style. I was constantly trying out different things, which, my undergrad didn't know a whole lot about art therapy, which is actually a very adaptive and good thing as an art therapist to really want to delve into those different pieces and try new things. Because your own personal interest, what you like as media, isn't necessarily going to be what your clients like. But it really is a lot more about just the visual self-expression than the actual, quote unquote quality of it. And there's fortunately recent research that's starting to kind of pan that out where, like stress hormones are lower after participating in art, even if you're bad at it.
Right. During your studies for your second degree at ESU, you started to formalize the connection in mental health disciplines and your growing area of interest working with children and adolescents with autism. Can you share some of the opportunities that you embraced during your time as a counseling grad student that led you on that academic path?
Absolutely. At the time in the graduate art therapy program, there was a high impact learning grant that allowed us to get a lot of iPads in the department. And so I was fortunately able to integrate that into my counseling internship, having access to that. And we also, multiple students across the department and programs had access to that. And so I was able to start exploring things like video games and apps as a part of the therapy process, both on the art therapy and the counseling side, and kind of in that combination. And being able to start to kind of see that pan out, I think ended up, not that I could have known there was going to be a pandemic in 2020, but helped me really be more prepared to be using telehealth and figuring out the ways that can work as in the therapy fields, whether it be counseling or art therapy. We also had a grant from the Royals to help support programming for families with children with autism and for children with autism. And so we were able to provide some programs that allowed for participation in popular culture kind of things. And so we did several movies that we saw. And fortunately, there were several that were really apt for our population. The movie Home is a great movie that shows, the alien in that movie is very much got characteristics of autism and has a lot of the social struggles. And so that gave us great opportunities to be able to work with the kids that were participating in the programming and the families and, help them kind of see themselves in the characters. I had also served as the conference chair for the Kansas Art Therapy Association when I was a graduate student in the counseling program. And so I was able to, find speakers and bring people in that were really relevant, not only for art therapy, but mental health as a whole, and looking at the creative process in mental health. And part of my access to those kind of people was because of my affiliation with the university. It's a lot easier sometimes to find people in those areas when you're, a student or a faculty. And I was also able to develop a kind of an elective for myself working with Dr. Phil Wirtz in the counseling program, where I wrote and co-published a peer-reviewed article on art and aging, kind of based in some previous work I had done with individuals with dementia. Dr. Wirtz also taught a class on aging. And so kind of the combination of my previous work in art therapy and learning more about kind of the counseling processes in that, we were able to put that together. And, we also got to see, jumping back to the movie thing, because that's just really awesome to be able to do sensory friendly movies. We also got to see Inside Out, which is like the ultimate mental health movie, because it's all about, those little voices in your head and the emotions tied to them. And we also got to see Zootopia, which was all about like diversity and people getting along. And so part of being a part of that grant really helped me to see like how much movies can really play a role when we're working with people. And although these were, technically kids movies, there are universal themes in these that can really, go across ages.
Yeah, and like so many animated films these days, there's always kind of subtext that's there to appeal to adults. So although they're animated, they really are for all ages. It was really fun to work on that grant with you. And to have the support of the Royals Foundation, the base in Kansas City, and our local theater, who Jessica mentioned the sensory friendly movies. So we had nights where we would have a whole theater to ourselves and do an art project that was an introduction to the film. And then the lights would be halfway up and the sound would be halfway down. And it made for a wonderful opportunity for those families to practice going to movies together.
Absolutely. And it was such a fun like internship experience for the students in the department, because they got to see that, you know, we might think of mental health fields as, you know, sort of that stereotypical person lying on a couch and someone writing in a notebook, but it really, what we do is so much broader than that. And so, you know, it's always great if you can get internship hours hanging out with kids, making art and watching a movie.
Exactly. And while you were working on your mental health counseling degree, you helped to develop the Autism Spectrum Certificate at ESU. And it's still running? Yeah, tell me about your role in that.
We started the certificate program technically under the special education program at ESU, but it was cooperative mostly between special ed and counseling. And so our intent was to offer, it was a 12 credit hour certificate that provided people additional specific training to working with individuals with autism. Because over the course of about the last 30 years, there's been a real increase in diagnosis. And so that, you know, comes with new challenges, like for special ed teachers and therapists, in terms of working with people with the particular challenges that are associated with autism, but also, you know, really as a part of, you know, my work and things, a lot of it is more about knowing the problems that co-occur with autism, because the autism is actually often very adaptive for people, but there's also a lot of anxiety and things that go along with it. And so the certificate program was, you know, to give people introductions to that, and to, you know, certain tools that you can use in classes to help, and tools you can use in therapy sessions. And so it started within, like I said, primarily the special ed department. I developed a class that looked at creative therapies and some behavioral methods in terms of working with the population, and have continued to teach that class. I've been teaching that class for, I don't know, probably about 10 years now. But that is sort of morphed now, because Emporia State has this one-of-a-kind federal grant under the rehab counseling program to expand programming in terms of preparing like vocational professionals, vocational rehab professionals, to be able to better meet the needs of individuals with autism and their specific work needs. And so that grant has led to sort of revamping the curriculum and really taking a really close look at it. And although I'm no longer full-time at ESU, I continue to be a consultant on the grant. And so we're working on developing curriculum and modifying kind of the existing structure that we had of that certificate, and shifting the primary placement of that certificate to the counseling department.
So your 2 graduate degrees and your recent doctorate really propelled you to national recognition as an expert in art therapy and autism. In fact, your dissertation, Building the Neurodiversity Bridge, a grounded theory examination of popular culture perseverations in art therapy with individuals with autism spectrum disorders, and your upcoming book based on that dissertation are unique contributions to the literature. So please share about those.
So I've always, you know, sort of identified as a nerd or a geek, and been very interested in superheroes and all those sort of things. And like I said previously, in working with individuals with autism, I've often found those kind of things as points of connection. And there's been a bit of a recent surge in literature on using popular culture in therapy, but nothing specific to working with individuals with autism. And so when I was completing my doctorate, I was reflecting on experience that I had had across, you know, mental health counseling settings that I had worked in, and also art therapy settings and places where I was combining them. And just, you know, really came up with this tremendous list of all these times that popular culture was really the point of connection, and the way that we were able to make some progress in therapy and really build relationships. And so I wanted to have that as the foundation of my dissertation. And so I did a retrospective study of a lot of my therapy notes to be able to kind of go through and see instances of when popular culture was really integral to what we were doing. And I found that, you know, more than half the time it was. And honestly, I probably didn't always note it because I was a Medicaid provider and I figured they would be like, why are you playing YouTube videos and therapy sessions? And so I had to find other ways to say things to, because I was meeting therapeutic goals, but in kind of a non-traditional way. And so after I kind of went through and looked for instances, I categorized them and looked at, you know, what are ways that really popular culture fits into the therapeutic relation, particularly with individuals with autism, but honestly, kind of on a broader level for a lot of folks. And so I was looking at things like, you know, there's sort of the traditional that we think of, which is as a reward. So you did this, and so now we can play 15 minutes of a video game. But there's a lot of deeper things going on too, like it being sort of an icebreaker and a way to form a relationship. You know, it being those popular culture pieces being a way to really handle anxiety. So, you know, being able to create artwork about your favorite anime might be a way to process through the fight you just had with your brother. And it's not something we would always think of. And so, you know, I developed a theory out of that because, you know, art therapy research in a lot of cases is still very young. And so, you know, coming up with our more of our own specific theories and ways to look at things and how it functions within those relationships is an important part. But in that, you know, I was really able to see that there was just a very little foundation for what I was doing in the literature. David Henley, who is an art therapist who has worked a lot with individuals with developmental disabilities, had like this one article that was talking about what I was talking about, where special interests were really something that were very integral to kind of working with this woman. Her name was Nadia, and she was very famous when she was young for being able to draw these horses that were super spectacular and had kind of sort of lost that ability over time. But in his working with her, he was really able to see that her specific interests, and when she was little, it was horses. When she got older, it was actually the Sears catalog, were how she connected to people. And that's how they forged a relationship, was her showing in pictures from the Sears catalog. And so seeing that there was foundation there, but that it hadn't really been kind of panned out and explored, it was a really rich area to be able to, you know, really investigate. And why is that doing that? Okay, there we go. Seriously. I think, strangely, that might be a call from somebody at the foundation at ESU, just based on the phone number. But anyway, and so from that dissertation, I do have a website because it was important to make all of that very accessible to a wide variety of populations. But also, you know, it's given me the opportunity to propose a book. I had been approached by a publishing company that works a lot with art therapists, Jessica Kingsley Publishers, about putting in a book proposal several years ago. And I was working on a doctorate, had so many things going on that just didn't, you know, pan out at the time. But I was finally able to put something in and just signed a book contract. And so hopefully 2022, there will be a book based in my dissertation.
Wonderful. We talked a little bit earlier about the intersection of your interests that led you to art therapy. How have those interests evolved into new passions and new intersections?
Well, you know, my interest in art as really a way of communicating, which was kind of how I came to art therapy, has really lent, again, to working with individuals with autism, but also in terms of like just looking broader at access to services and ability to gain services. So for instance, you know, that has led to me being involved in like diversity, equity, and inclusion activities. And I've participated in committees at ESU when I was there full time for that. And has really led more to advocating for licensing for art therapy. and helping art therapy to gain kind of more equal footing with the other mental health fields, because I love counseling and I love doing that, but art therapy is also a really big part of what I do. And not everybody wants to do both. And so being able to, again, just kind of open up that access and make sure that, clients and, people that want to participate have access to those things. Really kind of, just grew out of my being interested in art and psychology when I was young. So it's really kind of expanded over the years.
And when we were talking about your career path and your national recognition as an expert in art therapy and autism, you mentioned geek culture. And geek culture really sets up a space that predated your academic interests. What does it look like now?
So in kind of the really 50s and 60s, comic books and science fiction got really big, and that ended up being a place historically for people who now are diagnosed with autism to find communities where they felt like they fit. And that has really expanded and grown. And, the fact that now the biggest movie franchises are superhero-based movie franchises and science fiction-based movie franchises like Star Wars, that there really has been a growth in that in our culture in general. And so being able to kind of sort of research that and get an idea for how that really developed and how that sort of informed the way I grew up and the way I've interacted with people and the way I've come to interact with clients. I mean, I think the fact that geek culture has continued to develop and become a much bigger thing at this date sort of made a place for my dissertation to exist. It really wouldn't have had a place without that.
I think a wonderful motif throughout our conversation tonight is that you don't need to separate what informed who you are and what you love from what you do with your life. So before we move on to the next part of the evening's program, would you like to add any thoughts on how our passions can intersect to present deeply meaningful opportunities in our lives?
I think that often when we're young, people that are interested in art and relationships, which is really, kind of what I do as an art therapist and counselor, are kind of led to believe that those are sort of hobbies. And, pop culture things as well, that those are sort of hobbies. Now, granted, with YouTube and YouTube stars, that's a little bit different now, but that's a recent development. And so being able to see that I didn't have to, pursue a business degree. I think business is great and there's a lot of people that belong there, but I didn't belong there. And when I graduated from high school, most of my friends went for business degrees and that just wasn't for me. Knowing that I could continue with those areas that I was really interested in and find a place and something to do and a way to make a living, but in a way that, I didn't really dread my work. Has been a really important thing. And so being really, obviously I have to be a professional, separate pieces of myself from that professional world, but to really have who I am be a part of my work is really important.
Thank you, Jessie.
Thank you.
At this point, we'd like to move to a breakout session to provide attendees with the opportunity to reflect on the following question. What was something you heard today that has inspired you and can help you achieve success in your path to the future? You will be randomly assigned into breakout rooms and we'll have 3 minutes to discuss this question. And then we'll join back together and share our thoughts. The chat rooms will not be monitored, so make sure you jump in and discuss with the others in your room. Welcome back. We hope everyone had a chance to reflect. We'd like to hear a few comments from your discussions, and to provide a comment, either raise your hand or utilize the chat function. You don't need to turn on your video. You can just use your responses, the hand in your responses, or you can type something in the chat group.
Hi, Jessica. It was really nice to hear how basically your journey through from your first ideas about art therapy as an adolescent in high school to now, like how your approach has changed and your research interests and things have changed. Like that's just really encouraging to me as someone who's journey art therapy years ago, and I have been out of undergrad for like 10 years. So like I know that everyone's journey is different, but it's just really cool to just see someone else's and to hear about like kind of your thought process as you were going through that. So thank you very much for sharing.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's I mean, art therapy has really been a growing field, and it's you know, even when I first started out about 15 years ago, there were a lot less of us than there are now. And so it's nice to be able to connect with each other and see your journeys, and, you know, really kind of find out more of what's happening out there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm hoping to get a little help from our IT people. It looks like Libby Schmunke has a comment, but she's not able to access or unmute herself or access chat. So, okay. So Libby, if you can hear us, if you'll do the raise hand, we'll be able to hear you.
Hi, Jessie. I was hoping I could make eye contact with you, but I can't do that apparently.
Sorry.
But I was in the breakout session. I was just telling, we had 2 students in there that are currently in art therapy, you know, just about how, you know, rightly or wrongly, I feel so proud of you. And when you were a grad student, I was a new professor, and okay, so and stopping by the side of the road because I was running late to give you feedback on your master's projects. I can remember the deserted gas station where I pulled over to talk to you about your master's project.
Yep.
Gotten home yet. So anyway, good memories, and you've come so far, and it's just really awesome that you're still, you know, connected with us, and now you got this award. So I'm just really thrilled, and it was great to hear your whole story all in one place tonight.
Thank you, Libby, and thank you for, you know, always being there as a mentor and a colleague. It's, you know, I think that those relationships built as a grad student were part of why when I knew there was a job there, I remember contacting you and saying, hey, are you still looking for someone? You know, why I came back to ESU when I did. And I only left because of family reasons. So, you know, being, you know, knowing that it was a place that was, you know, welcoming and open. It's really important.
Yeah, it's great. And I can't believe that I learned something I did not know, and I can't believe I did not know it, that you have a pub with Dr. Wertz. I had no idea. That's amazing. I know I want to read it. So,
well, I'll have to send it to you.
Okay. Thanks and congratulations, Jessie.
Thank you.
So if you have a comment from your breakout session, to raise your hand, click on the participants tab and select the raise hand, and then we will know to unmute you so you can share your comments. Looks like we have a couple more, so those are being released. Okay, Carla Smith. You should.
Yes, hi Jessica. I just wanted to say that both my husband and I graduated from Emporia State. And even when we graduated, which was many, many years ago, Emporia State had this wonderful art program, had a wonderful counseling program, which neither one of us were necessarily in, but we knew it was even wonderful way, way back then. And you know, I loved hearing your story about coming from a small town, not really knowing where your life would end up, but really growing and growing and growing, and lots of it due to Emporia State. And I just think that's wonderful and makes us very proud.
Thank you. And yeah, absolutely. Emporia State has an amazing art program, and you know, has like glass blowing and things that just are kind of unheard of to be available often on the undergrad level. And the art therapy program is one of the oldest in the world, and the rehab counseling program is one of the oldest in the world, and the psychology program is one of the oldest in the US. And so there's just so much there that people don't necessarily know about.
Yep, I think that's absolutely right. Well, congratulations, and everyone should be very, very proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Clara Korn, looks like you have a comment, and we'll get you unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Jesse, you are such an inspiration to me. As also an ESU alum and now ESU faculty, you've just been absolutely encouraging in so many ways, and such an inspiration from the standpoint of a student, and as my supervisor toward my ATR, and consistently encouraging me to go along in the profession. And one of the things that I thought about during the breakout session is another way that you're inspiring something that I'm consistently trying to work on, which is that you have mastered this ability to combine all that you love in your personal life into all that you do in your professional life. And I also I love so many things, and I want to do all the things. And I haven't quite got to figure out how I'm going to do them all, but I know that I can, because I've seen you do what you do and marry so many amazing things together and to do so much good.
Well, thanks, Clara. And, you know, it's a pleasure having gotten to teach you and supervise you. And now we're sort of co-teaching a class, except we each have our own section. So all sorts of, you know, new experiences. And I mean, I think it took me a long time to really get to that point where I could really kind of, you know, make everything fit together. But it also just, you know, kind of made sense. And so, I mean, I know a lot of your interests and things, and I think there's probably a way to make them fit together, but yeah, it takes a lot of experimentation.
I'm sure it'll click in when it clicks in. And oh, and also part of that inspiration is that you're a fellow nerd and geek, and and you show me the way that you can use those things in everyday life. So thank you. This award is so well deserved.
I have made so many anime and Minecraft sculptures in the last several weeks since we started in-person school where I work. Yeah, the geekiness definitely is a part of my everyday life.
Fantastic.
We have one more comment from Amber Zewert.
Hi, Jessica. I just wanted to say, as everyone else has, like, I really appreciate your story because I also came from a small town in Iowa. I actually graduated with a class of like 14 students, so super tiny. And it's just really cool to see how you've developed and grown in this career and just found different areas of interest, because I've always felt that I have many areas of interest and can't seem to just like focus on one. But it's cool to hear how you've used all those interests in a way that has strengthened you as an art therapist and a counselor, and working with your clients and using just your passions to help them and to just share your art too.
Thank you. Yeah, I graduated with 36, but we were the largest graduating class. My brother several years later was only 26. So yeah, it's growing up in a small town, I always knew that I wanted to do big things, but I had no idea what they would be.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
Thank you, Amber. We'll move now to the questions that we've collected. And Jesse, the first one is, this year has been tumultuous. What events have you been paying the most attention to in your profession?
Well, definitely both COVID and, racial justice issues and police brutality issues have been things that have been kind of at the forefront. I work at a K-12 therapeutic school, so with kids who have a mental health diagnosis in addition to sometimes other issues. And so when we got out for COVID, we were trying to figure out how to continue serving this building full of kids on IEPs, with not having the last 2 months of school in a traditional way. And so that's really been kind of at the forefront. But also, Omaha has had a lot of protests and a lot of, concerns with police brutality and, various events happening in line with a lot of that as well. And so knowing that does affect the people that I work with, that's definitely something that I've been keyed in on, and trying to. I was reaching out to all the kids. We had literally just finished school for the year officially, and our therapeutic services are less frequent in the summer. So like the day after school ended was the day that George Floyd died, and so I was reaching out to the families and checking in. Did they need any resources to help explain things to their kids? What kind of questions and concerns were they having? And also, the presidential election is something that certainly influences the kids. I had a kid quoting a campaign ad when I was meeting with him earlier that he had been hearing repeatedly. And so, all these things are affecting the people we work with, even, 9-year-olds. So, just really being keyed in and aware of what's going on and holding space for people so they can process through those difficult things is important. Can't hear you.
We have another question. Who do you view as your greatest inspiration for your career?
That's a good question. I had an art teacher who taught me about art therapy and in high school. And so she was kind of why I decided to pursue things. But in terms of kind of professional role models, I've been fortunate to have Galen and Libby who've been in the field longer than I have. And in particular, Charles Anderson, who is one of kind of the founders of the field in the US and is a pioneer that we have great access to in Topeka. I was fortunate to have him as an internship instructor in my grad program and have remained connected to him. And he's just been a really great person to work with and to kind of see, Charles has sort of carved his own path in a lot of ways. So to be able to see that, but also really with Libby and Galen too. So I was fortunate to have access to people who were, very motivated and very involved in the field and have been, helped me see what possibilities are.
Another question we had come in: what do you think is the most difficult challenge you face in your professional experience?
I think that this is something that all therapists face, which is learning how not to take on other people's issues within yourself while you're helping them work through them. And a lot of that is just a matter of getting experience and learning kind of where to put those boundaries. But I have worked with children who have experienced some really traumatic things, and including murder and suicide and things like that. And being able to, and severe abuse, being able to kind of be there with them and partner with them on their journey, but also know that it's my job to be there, for them. I'm responsible to them, but not for them. I'm there to be there for them, but I don't have to take on those things specifically myself. And like I said, I think that's a challenge every therapist faces to an extent.
I have another question. This must be from a student. What's the best advice you could give someone going through a lot of stress with homework?
So I definitely remember having been there. And, a lot of what I did as a student, really kind of across all my degrees, was to make sure that I was, even when I felt like I didn't have time for it, trying to place self-care in there. So, more recently with my doctorate, I also had a lot of things happening in my personal life that were pretty stressful. And so just, carving out one night a week where I was just not going to do anything. It didn't matter if I had 10 things due. I needed to be able to have some of that focus on just at least attempting to relax. And, the fact is that taking like one night off is probably not going to prevent you from getting done, and is maybe going to help you feel more energized and help you get done quicker. But it took me a long time to learn those lessons. I wasn't great with that in undergrad. I wasn't great with that necessarily in my first master's. But it was definitely a lesson that I learned that was really important.
We have one more question, and I think it's a perfect one to end on. Do you have any upcoming projects that you're excited about?
Oh, well, I mean, it's certainly exciting to write a book, although also a bit intimidating. I also, have been asked, related to the mural that I completed as my master's project, to assist in creating a mural for the town that I grew up in. So my master's project mural was in the town I went to high school in, which is nearby. But I've been kind of working on that and trying to figure out ways to, portray a realistic history of the town, because they want another historical piece there. And it's cool to, be able again to raise the profile of the arts a bit in, these tiny areas that often people don't talk about it a whole lot. So that's exciting, working on a book, trying to figure out, I'm going to start adjuncting at a university here in town, actually the university where I got my undergrad. And I'm actually adjuncting with another ESU alum, Yasmin Tucker, and they've asked us to come in and teach on the undergrad level, kind of an intro to expressive arts therapies, because they've recognized that their students are often put in the place of, please come work with cancer patients, or please come work with kids, and they don't have any foundational things within their programming. And that's really exciting, because that's not something that was accessible when I was a student there. And it's also exciting that, like I said, some of my art professors weren't so sure that I had direction, and being able to actually come back to the art program that I'm a product of, and be able to, help develop it is really exciting.
Absolutely. We look forward to some of those students who you inspire to go into the field.
Yep.
Look forward to having them apply to ESU.
Yeah, we'll definitely be sending them to Discovery Day, and, making sure they check y'all out.
Wonderful. In closing, we'd like to thank everyone for celebrating the success of Emporia State University with our honored alumni, Dr. Jessica Stallings. Thank you so much for joining us. For the students who've joined us, we wish you continued success throughout the semester. Go Hornets.
Thank you.